All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to CompCheck episode number 8. We are done with stage 1, and that means that we get to start talking about Masters London. And yes, we will be doing a full-on tier list predicting where we think the teams are going to finish, as well as picking the first round matchups of the Swiss stage. But before we do that, I want to cover a few other topics. And the first one that I want to just take a quick look at is this project that I've been working on, which is a leaderboard for the MVP and the Rookie of the Year. So here's the MVP leaderboard that I have right now. If you're not familiar with the ARIA ranking, it is basically a formula of sort of a conglomerated metric of individual performance that is somewhat akin to the VLR rating, but it actually scores the players within their own role. So it sort of just compares duelists to duelists, initiators to initiators, and gives different baselines and sort of expectations about what performance is on those roles, so you don't have like a duelist just having a much better rating than, you know, a smoker because they do more damage by nature of their role. So currently we have Trent in first place, Izu in second, and Brock in third. And then you can see the rest of like the top 12 here. Definitely a decent sort of inclusion of various different roles in here. You know, some pretty notable names. And then also a few rookies making the list. As we scroll down a little bit more, you can see that X Ross and Neon, both of which are players that are having really good rookie seasons, are in the contention for MVP. Now, moving on to Rookie of the Year, we've got a little bit of a different story. Neon, kind of the runaway favorite right now. We've got WS Leo for XLG, who will also get to see at Masters London, which is cool. And then we have Neon's teammate Blows, who has been incredible as well on Leviathan. You can see the rest of the top 12 here as well. Some definitely pretty high impact names, players that are having really good impact on the teams that they've joined this year. And yeah, this is a fun little project that I've been working on. Let me know what you think, whether it's accurate to your own sort of perspective of the game or not. But yeah, Neon, Leo, Blows, ERV, and Sayonara are the top 5. Definitely could see some movement here based off of the results of Masters London. And this is just something that you can find on onetrick.gg. I've got the leaderboards there that will update every single time that I update the data, which is basically like, you know, every week or so as events happen. So moving on from that, let's go ahead and hop right into the analysis of the final few games of the Americas stage 1. We had Leviathan and G2 in the upper final, which was won by Leviathan. And this was a pretty interesting series for me just because it kind of felt like it was the first time that I had really seen G2 phased by a team that they were playing against. And I don't mean that as like a pun because Baby Bay's on the team, but more so just that it kind of felt like they were uncomfortable by how Lev was playing. Like the different tempo shifts, the set strats mixed in with the really slow discipline stuff, the heavy use of the operator on defense. It was really seeming to give G2 some problems as far as like figuring out how they wanted to approach their attack in particular, and also just in general adjust to what Lev was doing. It didn't really seem like G2 had any good answers, and it was also one of the first times that I really feel like I saw them get kind of tilted on stage. Like they looked frustrated. They looked like they didn't really have an idea of how to fix the problems that they were having. And that made me a little bit worried for them going forward. Of course, we now know that they went on to win the overall event and win that rematch. But this was definitely kind of an interesting series just because of how out of sorts G2 looked, in my opinion. Now, moving on to the lower final qualification match, we had Energy and 100 Thieves. And this one was, you know, it ended up being fairly close on both maps, but not really. I think it was a little bit more of, this is just Energy. They're just a little bit too good. They're a little bit too experienced. And to me, it felt a bit just kind of like a player difference, like the player quality, the consistency of the players, the ability for them to step up in the big moments was definitely just favoring Energy for the entire series, both maps. And, you know, I don't want to spend too much time sort of like, you know, kicking salt in the wounds, but We do have to look at Bang in particular. His performance was extremely poor. Um, 10 kills across 2 maps is kind of unacceptable at this level, and it's something that I definitely think is some, I wouldn't say it's necessarily always the case, but I do sort of have this sense that sometimes he does tend to fade in these bigger, really important matches. There are times where he does also step up and sort of carry the load in the big matches, but I feel like it's a little bit more often than not that he does kind of underperform in these really critical matches, which is just something that 100 Thieves maybe needs to work on sort of rectifying if they want to take that next step. And of course, it is definitely heartbreaking for 100 Thieves. They're so close yet again to making it international. And we saw like the really kind of heartfelt interviews with Asuna after the fact. It's unfortunate. The Americas region is very competitive, and there's a lot of really good teams. And sometimes you can be a good team also and just not ever make it to these international events because everybody else is also good. So it does kind of feel like 100 Thieves is sort of in that spot right now. One thing that I think is a bit of a silver lining is that it does seem like Cryo is pretty like set into this Sentinel role, which is I think something that can be built upon. Timotino also had a pretty solid series. Like the pieces are definitely there for 100 Thieves to continue to grow and improve. I do sort of wonder if they will maybe react a little bit more intensely just because we are in this last sort of year of the VCT partnership system, and it has been a while since they made it international, and it does feel like they're maybe getting a little bit like skill gapped at times by some of these really top tier teams. So I don't want to say that they necessarily need changes, but I definitely am curious to see how they do react to this sort of latest crushing blow to the confidence of their ability to actually go do something on the international stage. Energy on the other side of things does qualify for London, so they make their second Masters of the year, which is probably the best. Is this the best that a Champions winning team has done in the following year? It might be. EDG might have also done this. I don't totally remember off the top of my head, but Energy definitely trying to buck the trend of winning champs and then kind of falling apart as a team. Obviously, they only had one roster move, and they just seem kind of like well established in their ways, which has made them a pretty consistent team, even if they aren't necessarily playing at like peak championship level form quite yet. But also, they did look extremely scary in this lower bracket. Obviously, making the lower bracket run is a pretty big deal all the way to the event. And they did drop a very narrow series to G2. This one was extremely fun to watch. And it also kind of leads me to be very curious to see how, the different styles match up. There's going to be a lot of variables in London. We'll talk about that when we start analyzing the event. But we're going into a new patch era with Neon being somewhat nerfed. We've got, Ascent kind of rising in popularity in the map pool. And then we have all these different teams from different regions with different styles. And styles definitely do seem to be kind of making matchups here. G2 just consistently beats Energy, but Energy looks like they're so much better than almost every other team in the region. But they just can't beat G2. It looked like this might be the series that they do, but then G2 kind of grinded it out. And of course, they go on to rematch against Lev in the final. And this was a great series as well. It was definitely another one where it kind of felt like, well, maybe Lev is just going to be able to put G2 in a tough spot. They looked like they made them uncomfortable in the first series. And then they have the double map ban. But I think it was definitely one of those situations where Lev is a little bit more one-dimensional than G2. G2's been here before. They've experienced all the things there are to experience, basically. They know how to react to different teams, how to adjust, how to play 5-map series, how to, grind out these really close maps and take the momentum at the right time. And so even though they did drop down to a 2-1 deficit, we can see that they were able to come out strong on Pearl, give themselves a really good opportunity to win this map, and then come out on Split, a map that they definitely have been struggling with recently, this Split. But they really shut down Spike, which is a huge deal. I feel like Spike has been extremely critical to Lev's success on the attack side, especially on a map like Split, just because of his quick entries, making space for the team. And GT did a pretty good job shutting him down. See 5 and 11 on attack. Pretty solid reduction of output for one of the most important players for Lev. And so, I mean, where does this leave the Americas teams? I think probably we are sending the 3 best representatives at this point. Certainly feel very confident about Energy and G2. And then Lev, I think, is a team that maybe they will have a little bit of a step down in performance due to, international inexperience, as well as having to deal with this Neon nerf. I mean, what do they do with Spike? Are they going to put him on Sentinel? What are they going to do with Neon? Is he just going to play full-time Jet? I am a little bit curious and, slightly pessimistic about Lev because of the changes that are coming in. And so we will have to kind of see how that goes. I think that probably puts us at a place. Oh, I guess one last thing that I do want to show is just kind of the pick'ems. So we did pretty well here. We had G2 winning it all. They did win it all. But I had them going through in the upper bracket. You can see that we missed on crew. We didn't have energy qualifying. Definitely a big miss there. But we did have Lev making it as well. And so, yeah, did pretty well in the Americas pick'ems. Definitely the best region, I think. I think I did okay on Pacific. Pretty bad on EMEA. And then China was, it was all right. So yeah, I think Americas was my most accurate pick'em. Anyway, let us go ahead and move on to Masters London. And this is going to be a very, very interesting event. We have a lot of sort of unknown teams and just really interesting storylines too. Obviously Lev, the young team, making their debut on the international stage. We've got GE making their organizational debut on the international stage. We have Full Sense with the former Talon team. We've got Foot, who were sort of always contenders at internationals, but then had a very down period, reinvented their team, and now is back. And then we've got, kind of the unknowns of the Chinese teams. They've had much longer to prepare because they finished so much earlier than everybody else, but they always seem to choke at internationals. So how will they fare? Vitality, seemingly kind of rounding into form. This is definitely a team that could be in the playoffs potentially. Energy as well, also starting in groups, is a very, very scary team for anybody to match up with in Swiss. And then on top of that, like I mentioned before, we've got meta change and also not really map change, but it kind of is, just because Ascent came in very late just for playoffs. And so we have a lot of different moving pieces to analyze and try to make our predictions from. And so I think let's just go ahead and bring up the tier list, and I'm going to try and break this down as best as I can. Right now, for me, I would say that there's a clear number one team. And the reason that I have it structured like this, with 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and 10 to 12, is that I like to look at sort of like the top 3 teams. This is the grand final team, and then the 2 lower final teams put into one bucket. Then we've got 4 to 6, which is like, these are teams that are, potential contenders for the event title, but more likely will sort of like vie for a top 4 placement. And then we've got 7 to 9, which is like the final teams that will be in playoffs, and like the first out of playoffs potentially, with one team that maybe doesn't even make it out of Swiss. And then we sort of have like the first 3 out. Now, sometimes we end up in situations where we have a team that starts out in the upper bracket that I don't necessarily think is that good. And so they might end up lower than is possible for them to actually be. So this is not necessarily the placement. This is power rankings in my brain. Like, who is the most likely team to win based off of like their their form, their expectations, that type of thing. So I think we're just going to go ahead and start this off with sort of the obvious stuff. Paper X is, in my opinion, the best team right now. They probably are the most likely to win, considering they start in the upper bracket, so they have to win less games than most teams, which means that they get to kind of, spend more time reinventing themselves, hiding their stuff that's new, analyzing the teams that are already playing. And they're a team that should be experienced enough to not start slow. A lot of teams that do start off in the upper bracket, especially like the newer teams maybe that haven't been to very many internationals, do tend to struggle starting too slow because they're maybe not used to the stage, or they didn't necessarily have as good practice, or maybe they even come to the event a little bit later. I don't totally know what the travel situation is, but I would assume that the teams that start in the bracket stage do tend to travel later than the other ones, just for budgeting reasons. So there's a variety of reasons that there is sort of like this first seed curse that does seem to persist year over year. And I do think that Paper X probably should be able to avoid it, but they are a team that is pretty momentum based. And so there is like a tiny little part of me that's like, maybe they are going to struggle based off of starting in the upper bracket. But it's not enough for me to take them out of the number one spot. Okay, let's also go ahead and throw our bottom teams in there. I think DRG and Foot are fairly clearly the bottom two teams at the event. I know other people probably want me to just put all of the Chinese teams down here, but for me, I think DRG is kind of clearly the weakest team. They haven't been that impressive. I didn't think they were going to qualify. They do have talented players in their team, and they are kind of like a weird wild card team because of how they play and the strats that they call and the comps that they run, and they definitely are a little bit awkward to prepare for. But I also just don't think that fundamentally they're as good as basically any other team at this event. And they also have been kind of up and down in probably the easiest region globally. So I think it's enough to put them in the bottom here. Foot is another team that I know has been, this might be a little bit of a hotter take. They looked really good in stage one early on, and then they kind of like flattened out in terms of their trajectory, and they ended up in the third seed. For me, I think they're definitely a dangerous team. They have a lot of firepower, but I do think that they will be hurt by the Neon nerfs because I don't necessarily think that their current roster setup is in the best place to slot right into like another double duelist or a different type of meta. Maybe they'll just play some of the old stuff. I don't really know exactly where teams are going to go right now. Like Neon is probably still playable on some maps, but they were playing it everywhere. And so I am kind of concerned about where Foot goes and how they adapt to the next thing, the next trend, basically. I also just think that they are probably the most one-dimensional team in terms of how they play the game at the event, and I think that these high-level teams will be able to watch their VODs, kind of figure out how they want to play the game, and then come up with a good game plan to counter that. So I'm going to have them in the bottom two. Okay, now let's talk about who else goes in these spots. For me, I think let's go back to the top. Who else belongs up here with Paper X? Honestly, I think that Paper X is kind of in a tier of their own to some extent. I do think that they have shown enough dominance in a region that's good for them to kind of be on their own tier. But I wouldn't say, I mean, and this is an international event, you never really know what's going to happen. There's definitely some other teams that are close enough to put them in this same sort of tier, and I think one of them for me is Heretics. I was fairly early on the Heretics train in terms of I think I picked them to win. Can't remember in the pick'ems, but I definitely had them going to the event, and they certainly took a little bit of a circuitous route to get there. But I think that is probably good for them because they were sort of struggling with their identity and they had to spend quite a bit of time figuring out how they wanted to play the game and who their starting five was going to be. And so I think playing a bunch of games was actually a good thing for this team because it allowed them to figure out what they don't want to do. They don't want to have Rians on Sky. They want to have Rians on Scans. They don't want to have, Woot constantly playing Neon. They don't want to have comeback on their team. They want to have Kashmaris playing Odin Neon. They want to play these maps. I think all of these things were actually very good for this team because I feel like their form got progressively better over the course of the stage, and it culminated in them winning the event over a very, very skilled team in Vitality. So I think I'm pretty confident putting Heretics in the top three. I think that they're going to be at home essentially as well. Of course, they've got a British player on their team. It's in London. There's going to be a lot of extra energy around that. I feel like this is a team that potentially is fueled by that. Also, both their coaches are from the UK, so there's a lot going on the line for Heretics. And maybe that pressure will be too much for them, but they're also a pretty experienced team outside of Kashmaris. And so I think that they are actually set up very, very well for this tournament. Kashmaris is the interesting thing. Like, what do they do if Neon is not super good? And that is actually a very interesting thing to think about because if everybody is shifting off of Neon, that means that a lot of people will be preparing for non-Neon stuff. And so if Heretics does stick with the Neon, that might be one of the situations where everybody is scrimming teams that are not playing Neon, preparing for non-Neon comps, and then they come in with the weird read, which is to still play Neon. Because, there's a quote out there of Kashmara saying he actually likes playing the new Neon, which, maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But there's always that weird thing where, like, if you go slightly against the grain, and people are maybe shifting away from something that's actually still pretty good, sometimes you have a little bit of an edge there. So I actually feel pretty confident about this, as long as Neon is not terrible and it doesn't completely ruin their roles, which I don't think it will, because I feel like this team is resourceful enough to solve the new problem. Although they did struggle to do that in stage one, I guess, and kickoff. But I don't know. I guess I'm putting some faith in Heretics, which is kind of an oxymoron in and of itself. Anyway, let's move on from them. And who else goes where? Okay, so I've got a little bit of a conundrum because for me, I think the teams coming out of Swiss are fairly straightforward. I think Vitality is going to make it out. And I think that Full Sense is going to make it out. And then the other teams are Lev and Energy and GE and XLG. And I think Energy is also going to make it out of Swiss, which leaves us with one more spot for Lev, XLG, and GE. And that's tough because XLG has been very good domestically, horrifically bad internationally, like literally the worst team in the history of the game internationally with more than 4 games played. Lev was really close to winning the first seed in Americas. So theoretically, they should be kind of a shoe-in to go forward. Energy was the 3rd seed, so maybe they're the one that falls out. Then we have GE, who looks like they are kind of rounding into very good form. A lot of people have a lot of faith in this team all of a sudden. So who actually makes it out of groups here? That is a tough one. For me, I think I'm just going to go ahead and throw Vitality up here for now. I feel very confident that they will make it out of groups. I think they are kind of finding the right lane for themselves. And also, one of the big things that I will be talking about and focusing on is sort of like the next meta, where everybody does seem to be going towards Jet as like a big part of that. And I feel like Vitality has one of the best Jets in the world historically on their team. So it should work out pretty well. And I think that because of the flexibility of their players, they should be in a pretty good spot when it comes to figuring out like what to play, regardless of what ends up being good. Chronicle can play everything. Yampy can kind of play everything. Sayonara can play a bunch of different things. I think they're in a really good spot, just like team wise, as far as what they want to do. And I would almost go as far as putting them in the top three. We may end up there at some point, but we'll put them here for now because I do think that they will make it out of Swiss, and I do think they have pretty high potential at this event. Who else? I mean, I think we can also throw G2 in here. We need one more team up in the top three. This may end up being G2 as they are the number one seed out of Americas. Maybe, potentially. I think I will throw them up there for now, actually. Okay, so we now have, oh, and then there's, you know what? There is one more kind of interesting team, which is EDG. They start in the upper bracket, and now that has no bearing in how I'm thinking about these numbers. Like they could easily just be, down here if I thought they were bad. But I'm actually fairly optimistic about EDG right now because, again, they had extra time to prepare. They have looked better and better over the course of stage one. They have one of the best jets ever in terms of his impact with the operator in Kong Kong. And when they put Kong Kong and Smoggy on duelists, they have looked really good this year. And Smoggy's raise has been good. Kong Kong on jet. I feel like there's something there that they could definitely run with. It is a meta that rewards people just like taking crazy timings and pushing out and contacting, and this is a team that loves to do that. I mean, they're famous for having nobody, the initiator player, just be like running down into middle by himself to take fights. Chichu is famous for just pushing through smokes on timings. I definitely think that EDG is actually a dark horse team. I would almost want to put them in the top three. I'm going to put them in 4 to 6 right now as a team that has very high potential to go deep in this tournament. They obviously start in the upper bracket or in the playoffs, so they do have a decent chance with that. But I think that they're a team that's set up pretty well at the moment. But we'll have to see how that translates from regional to international. Okay, we're starting to kind of narrow things down here. And we may shift a few of these around. So I guess the real question is who is going to be the last team out? Going to be GE? Going to be Lev, the world champs? I think for me it's probably just going to be XLG. Like history shows that they do not do well at these. They start the event against Energy, which is not a great place to be. Very likely starting 0-1 in the Swiss stage. And yeah, I mean, surely at some point they will figure out how to translate their regional success to internationals. But for me, it's not going to be at this event. I also don't know how they're going to handle the meta shift either, because they've been pretty reliant on both the Yoru and the Neon, and those two agents have definitely fallen out of favor. I do think that Rarga can play like Raze and Jet and stuff like that, but they've been a pretty heavy double duelist team, and I don't exactly know where we're going meta wise and how they're going to be able to handle that. So we'll throw XLG down here. And I think I almost want to just put them at the bottom just because of how bad they've been internationally. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so now we have 7 to 9, which is like playoffs / maybe getting eliminated in Swiss. Go ahead and just put all these teams there for now. And we got to move one up to 4 to 6 as a real contender. The obvious one is Energy, just because of the pedigree of their players and their team. I think that Energy, I don't know. It's interesting. At times, this stage, Energy looked like they were the best team in Americas. When they beat Furia, when they beat Crew in playoffs, it looked like they were just on a completely different level than the teams that they were playing against. But then they lost to G2, and it wasn't like they couldn't have won that series, but also G2 was definitely just kind of consistently better, I think, throughout the course of that series. And I think that maybe Energy is going to be in a little bit of a weird place moving away from the Neon, because Mata has been very good on Neon, but also this is a team that has consistently been kind of going against the grain of most teams. Um, so how will they handle this? Will they just go to Kiko full-time smokes? They've been experimenting more and more with Kiko as duelist and Mata not playing duelist. And I don't actually know if I like that direction. I think I kind of prefer it if Mata is their duelist and if they were to be more all in on him being the first guy in and supporting him than trying to sort of like shift those resources to Kiko and have Mata be more of like the flex player. Not that they can't do it, but to me, I feel like, I mean, they won a world championship with Mata as their duelist. And as good as Kiko has been, I think that Mata is just better overall in that role. So I guess it kind of depends on which direction they go. But I mean, another thing to also think about, and kind of one of the reasons why I think I'm actually going to be rating the Americas teams lower than maybe other people would, is that they simply just have less time to prepare, right? China has been done with stage one for a month, I think. Pacific and EMEA finished a week earlier. And so Americas is finishing, and they finished what, yesterday? And now they have to go to London and play in less than 2 weeks. And these teams are also playing the EWC qualifiers, which means they probably don't really have very much time to change anything. And so they have to either change on the fly or they just have to trust in what they have, which means that maybe they come in a lot more readable than some of these other teams. So that whole timing thing is another thing that is kind of making me a little bit suspicious about Americas at this event. Okay, let's finish up this ranking. Where do we want these teams to go? I think for me, out of these four, the most likely team to go up is probably Energy, just because of the championship pedigree. But I also think that I might just move Full Sense up, because that looks really weird to me. You know what? No, it's not going to be Full Sense. I think if any team, if it was going to be any team, it would be GE. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Lev up here actually. I think the Energy is maybe going in the wrong direction if they do go with more Kiko duelist. Also, the pressure of playing in front of your home crowd. I know that I said that was going to be maybe a buff for Heretics, but in this case, I'm going to go with a little bit of a nerf for Kiko. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously, we'll kind of have to see. Okay, so I have three in each spot. How do I feel about this? I kind of want, part of me kind of wants to put G2 a little bit lower. Now I'm thinking about this timing window. I think I might actually put G2 lower. And I kind of want to put Vitality or EDG in the top three. I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to put Vitality. Ooh. I think that looks good to me, actually. I'm a pretty big believer in Durka. I think that he's really good. And I think that this meta is going to fit him pretty well. Now, if I had to actually do the predictions, so as some of you may know, I've done predictions with this like prediction app that I've made in the past. We've got all the teams here, and if we were to just do by the power rating, we can see there's some other teams in here that obviously are not at the event, but Paperx number 1, Vitality's number 2, Heretics number 3, T1's actually number 2, but they're not at the event. And we've got Energy, Lev, MIBR, Gen G. I don't know why Gen G is so high. That seems crazy to me. G2 down here. Okay, maybe something is going wrong. How is Gen G number 8? You know what? Let's revisit that one later after I've checked for some bugs. But I do feel pretty good about this. I feel pretty good about this power ranking. Although maybe we just put DRG in last. I think that makes a little bit more sense. Yeah, I think I feel pretty good about this power ranking. So we've got Paperx in 1 with Heretics and Vitality as sort of like my favorites to potentially win. We've got EDG, G2, and Lev in 4 to 6. We've got Energy, Full Sense, and Global in 7 to 9, and XLG, Foot, and DRG in the last 3 spots. Ooh, man. Lev? Are they too readable? You know what? I could spend forever debating this. Let's lock this in as my current power ranking. And let's go ahead and do our little predictions here on the actual event. So choose 4 teams from the group to advance to the next stage. So we definitely have Vitality, Energy, and Lev going through. And then we have to choose between Foot, Global, Foot, Global, Full Sense, XLG, and DRG. Ooh, that's tough. Man, I actually kind of think that Global's going to beat Lev. I kind of feel like Global is going to beat Lev, though. Because, where's my... I kind of feel like Global's going to beat Lev because I feel like they should be able to game plan them pretty well. And Lev is getting nerfed by the Neon. That's a good point. I think I'm actually going to drop Lev down. We'll bring Energy up to the top 6. Lev getting nerfed by Neon being nerfed, I think, is going to be a problem for them. Do I think that they will lose to Global, though? I think it's really 50-50, actually. I think I'm going to go ahead and send Full Sense through and Lev through. But this could definitely be Global. I feel pretty confident in XLG, DRG, and Foot not making it. Ooh, this could be... Is it Global or is it Lev? I think I'm going to go with Lev. I think I'm going to go with Lev. Sorry, Global fans. Sorry, Global fans. I think we're going to go with Lev here. Okay, let's go ahead and do the predictions as well. It's kind of at the bottom of the screen, but you can see picking Energy over XLG, obviously, in the first bit. Vitality over DRG, Full Sense over Foot, and then I guess I will take Lev over Global. Is there any world where Global loses or Global wins the first matchup and then doesn't make it? That would be nuts. I really feel like they're going to win this first match, though. But also, I don't really know. I mean, Yudaton Jet is good. Autumn Secondary Duelist is good. Globals looked good recently. I think I'm just gonna go with Lev. I don't know. I think it's gonna be really close. I feel like whoever wins Lev and Global in this first year is gonna make it through into playoffs. I'm just gonna go with Lev, but I think it's really close. I think it's really, really close. Um okay. That's my power ranking, my predictions for the first bit of Swiss stage. Um Now let's talk a little bit about the meta going into London. So where we stood at the end of stage one is that Neon was successful on like 70% of the map pool. Had a few maps where she was not super good. I do think we'll probably see her get dropped on Split and Breeze and Lotus, probably, which were her three worst maps. And probably will be dropped on other maps as well. I am not a Neon player myself, and so I don't really know how much it's going to affect like how it feels to play the agent. Generally speaking, what happens when an agent gets nerfed that's very popular is a couple of things. First of all, people are ready to switch off the agent because they usually get really bored of playing the same thing over and over and over and over. So they're just super happy to go play something else. And then on top of that, if there's like a core mechanical part of the agent that gets changed in a negative way, the usual interpretation of that is that the agent is dead. Whether or not they're actually dead or not, just look at like Chambers' teleport gets changed, everybody drops him. Yoru's teleport gets changed, everybody drops him. It's like I think there was even a time when Viper first had the poison orb duration nerfs where everybody was kind of trying to like desperate to switch off of Viper. So I definitely think that Neon is going to have a significantly lower pick rate at London. And I would expect Jet and Raze to spike quite a bit. Will it drop to 0? I don't think so, but it's definitely going to go quite low. Waylay is another one that's really interesting to me. I feel like there's definitely some spots where Waylay can be played. Her win rate was not great on almost any map, but I definitely think that there's some potential for her to be played on maps like Ascent. The sample size is tiny, so I wouldn't really look at this, but like I think Ascent is definitely a place where Waylay could be played, kind of like Jet, but has more stopping power. A little bit of a safer aggro opping agent as well to some extent. I definitely think there's potential on Lotus as well. Waylay Raze seems okay. Fracture also seems decent, and then hasn't really been played on Haven at all. I wonder if we'll see some teams go with Waylay on Haven. Most teams are just playing like Neon Jet right now, and so I do wonder where teams go on Haven in particular as well. Will we go back to like the Viper comp being a thing? I genuinely have no idea. I do think that some teams will play the Viper comp, like the Gen G comp, but maybe with a Waylay or a Jet instead of the Neon. And then, of course, we do have Jet, who has been really good on Split in the double duelist. Solid on Breeze. Pearl, fairly low. Neon has been one of the best agents on Pearl. So Pearl is going to be really interesting to watch because that will really tell you how people feel about Neon, because I think it's been Neon's best map, if I remember correctly. Ascent is technically the best map, but the sample size is quite small. Pearl has been one of the more played maps with Neon historically as well, and Neon's always been good. So if teams go off of Neon on Pearl and they go towards like a Jet or a Waylay or a Yoru or something like that, I think that'll really kind of tell you the story about how teams feel about Neon. I do think we're going to continue to see a bunch of Phoenix. If we pull up Phoenix's stats, I mean they're just really kind of absurd. 50% or above win rate, non-mirror on every single map in the pool except for Lotus. And Lotus is basically right around there. Sample sizes may vary, but he's been very good on basically every map. I don't think that the Ascent one is going to hold. Honestly, I feel like KO is just clearly better than Phoenix on this map. That's my opinion. I know there's people that disagree with that, but I think that the agents are close enough together in terms of how they play that I would probably just rather have the KO because of all the extra stuff that KO does. And Ascent is one of those maps where having somebody that can actually dive through the choke point is really good. So I think this will be heavy Jet, and also I think Waylay is definitely an interesting option as well. So duelist meta should be pretty interesting to monitor. Raze is another one, certainly kind of like a niche agent at this point, but seems to be doing pretty well in that niche depending on what it is. Clearly the best duelist on Split, I think. And obviously a very good pick on Fracture, always has been. And ever since teams switched to Raze over Neon on Lotus, I think it has been very good as well. I think that the thing about Raze is that the ability to be creative and airborne is really, really high on certain maps. Like, think about how Jing dives out of heaven on Split and is just so impactful every time he comes out of B heaven for a retake or out of A heaven with a rocket into elbow. Like, really, really high impact. And then the Boombot going through smokes on some of these maps where you just need like one more piece of info utility. If you don't have the Raze, oftentimes you end up just really starved for information and space on the map. And I feel like Neon, especially with like the nerfs to jump peaking speed and stuff like that, is really going to struggle gaining that information. So Raze kind of goes way up in my book in that regard. On Ascent, that's kind of irrelevant. And obviously with Bind leaving the pool, Raze was already kind of falling out of favor on Bind to some extent. So I think that she's still kind of a niche agent, but probably with the current pool, with Fracture, with Split being solid, and Lotus as well, those are probably going to be the three. We see her played a lot. And then, of course, with Jet, I mean, how far does the Jet sort of switch go? I assume Breeze will be pretty popular. I definitely think some teams will explore it on Pearl because Jet has always been pretty good on Pearl with her ability to play aggressively with the op on B long on defense, breakthrough choke points on attack. Contact with the operator should be really good on attack as well. So probably will be quite heavily played on a lot of the maps in the pool. The other interesting thing is just like the Initiator and Sentinel meta. We look at this real quick. Cypher, highest win rate Sentinel with a pretty big sample size. Deadlock, also some success. Sage, also successful. So really kind of like the three agents that are the best against Neon having the most success. Not very shocking, honestly. Vice is an interesting one. Actually, one of the lower win rate Sentinels. And I think that part of it is just because the way that teams are playing against Vice is that, and also just like the play pattern of Vice is so much so where you're just like, you have your setup and teams know how to beat these setups now. Like, you find out where the Vice wall is with a drone, you go bait the wall, and then the Vice really feels a little bit kind of low impact after that because you've lost your info and also your stopping tool most of the time. Whereas with Cypher, even if they break one of your trips, you still have a camera for information that is maybe getting 2 lanes. You've got smokes for yourself. You have another trip somewhere else. So I think Cypher's informational advantage is really, really good, and it's one of the reasons why he's so high win rate, even though technically he's like at the weakest state he's ever been at as an agent. And I do wonder how this sort of picture is going to change with less Neon being played, because if there's less Neon being played and we're going towards like Jet and Raze, Cypher probably is still pretty good. Maybe a little bit worse, but still pretty good. Deadlock and Sage, I definitely think go a bit down in value because you can go over the wall if you're going like jet rays or waylay rays or something like that on every map, both of those agents can dive over the wall. And so it's less stopping power than against a Neon. But it is nice to be able to be reactive with your utility and slow down like half the team and just kill the duelists that have gone in. Yeah, interesting. Maybe we see more chamber. I'd be a little worried if we start seeing more Killjoy. Honestly, we'll probably just see more Vice. I feel like a lot of people are just going to be copying what G2 is doing. Lots of Vice being played. It is definitely a good agent, and it'll actually be interesting to see if the win rate goes up without as much Neon being played. Just because, I don't know, Jet Rays are a little bit worse at dealing with Vice's thing. Another thing about Neon is like, yes, it's good at stopping Neon on the ground, but also Neon has the wall that can be used to kind of smoke for yourself to bait the wall and the thorns. And then oftentimes, because Neon's coming in so fast, the Vice sort of has, they kind of have to panic react and like pop all of their utility, and then the Neon team can just reset and hit again. So yeah, this is going to be really interesting to monitor also, like where teams go. I mean, Chamber seems like the pretty obvious, like decent agent, but also if teams are going to be switching to Jet, maybe Chamber's market share kind of falls because you just have your Jet that's now the Opera again. And so I think there's actually going to be a pretty big meta change in terms of what is happening. Initiator is probably going to stay fairly static. I mean, Sova, Fate are always good. KO is kind of rising a bit, has been very, very good on Breeze. Has had a bit of a resurgence on Pearl as well. Definitely kind of niche. Also, I mean, we'll have to see how much impact he has on Ascent. I would be so shocked if teams don't play more KO on Ascent. I just am not. I mean, Phoenix is good. Don't get me wrong. Phoenix is definitely good, and he's pretty good on Ascent. If you're playing Jet Phoenix, if you're playing Waylay Phoenix, I think that's pretty good. But I mean, the G2 Yoru Phoenix is kind of crazy to me. But maybe it's just strong enough. 6-point ult, the flash is being really hard to turn. The Molly and the wall does damage. I mean, maybe KO won't come back into Ascent. Maybe Phoenix really is just good enough to sort of like supersede him. But yeah, Sova Fade always good. I mean, Teo's definitely kind of fallen off. Gecko, Breach, sort of unplayable. Sky has had some pretty good impact. I think on Fracture in particular, she's looked quite good. Like a Sky Fade, maybe duo, or a Sky plus another initiator on Fracture has been kind of interesting. Probably about all she'll be played on, to be honest. But maybe we'll see a little bit more Split or Lotus at some point. Overall, the meta is going to be very interesting to monitor, and we've got some pretty good teams to watch. Like Paperex is going to have some interesting stuff. Energy always has an interesting read. Vitality is super flexible. Full Sense does some interesting stuff. Global is always down for some weird things too. G2's been an innovator. I mean, the event should be sick. I'm very excited to watch it. And yeah, I mean, now you know who I think is going to win. Next week, when I do this episode, I will give you the top 10, top 15 players, top 10 players probably of the event. Maybe I'll do 15, probably top 15. So we'll talk about the players more specifically. I'll give you my rankings for that. For now, I think that is going to be it for the episode. Kind of a short one, but I do appreciate everybody watching. And we'll see you next week for more Masters London. Talk a bit more about, where things are going, maybe some more predictions, stuff like that. Peace out for now. Have a good day.